intelligent, reserved, cursed, the Dunmer of Morrowind. Within the Elder Scrolls universe, there are a number of different races and tribes of elves, or mer, from the High Elves of Somerset Isle to the Lost Ayleids of Central Tamriel. One of the elven races that went through drastic changes and events, and yet still continued to thrive, were the Dunmer, or Dark Elves. These elves were most prominently depicted in the Elder Scrolls III, Morrowind, but they've made significant appearances throughout the entire series, and generally rank among the most popular races in the franchise. Like all of the peoples of Tamriel, the Dunmer have a deep and lengthy history, and so this video will only serve as an overview of their lore. The full origin of elves in the Elder Scrolls series is best saved for another video, but during the early days of time on the world of Nirn, there existed a race of beings known as the Aldmer. Very little concrete information is known about these people, but they possibly originally hailed from a continent known as Aldmeris. According to myth, something catastrophic happened to Aldmeris, and so many of the Aldmer departed the continent and sailed for new territory. Some of these landed on what would be known as the Somerset Isles, off the coast of Tamriel, and settled their new civilization there. Over time, various groups of the Aldmer would leave the Isles and begin to explore and settle the mainland of Tamriel. One of these groups was deceived by a Daedric prince who masqueraded as one of the most revered deities of the Aldmer. This Daedric prince convinced these elves that the Aedra had lied to them and were the weaker of the two groups of deities. An influential elf within this group known as Veloth stepped forward and led these elves, who took the name of Chimer, meaning people of the north, across Tamriel to the far northeast. They finally settled in the rough and alien region known as Resdain, later called Morrowind. It is possible that the elven race known as the Dwemer were already present when the Chimer arrived, or at the very least, soon after. The Chimer began thriving across Morrowind, worshipping three Daedric princes that they believed to be good, and appeasing and respecting the ones they believed to be bad. This brought them into direct conflict with the Dwemer, who were either apathetic to the gods, or believed that science and technology could rival the gods' power. The Dwemer and Chimer fought for years over territory in Morrowind, until they encountered a common enemy, the Nords of Skyrim. Due to the fighting between the two groups, the Nords were able to conquer Morrowind for many years, until they banded together to force the Nords out. This alliance was created through two individuals, Dumak, the Dwemer king, and Nerevar, the leader of the Chimer during the war. After the successful war against the Nords, however, the Chimer and Dwemer would soon return to war with one another over religious differences caused by an artifact known as the Heart of Lorkhan. The exact nature of this artifact isn't important for this video, but it was a powerful magical object that one of the chief engineers of the Dwemer believed could be used to ascend the Dwemer race to godhood. This was being done without the Dwemer king's knowledge, and Nerevar ended up learning about it before he did. Nerevar confronted the king about the situation, as this was seen as blasphemy by the Chimer, but the Dwemer king claimed his people were innocent. Another war broke out between the races, culminating at the Battle of Red Mountain, where Nerevar, his trusted friend Dagoth and a small group of Chimer confronted the Dwemer king. The king collapsed from his wounds, and in his desperation, the chief engineer of the Dwemer used his enchanted tools upon the artifact, causing the entire Dwemer race to suddenly and instantly disappear. In the aftermath, the engineer's enchanted tools remained behind, as well as the artifact, and it was left to Nerevar to decide what to do. Dagoth urged him to destroy the tools, but Nerevar wished to confer with his three advisors, known as the Tribunal. He left the tools behind for Dagoth to guard, and the Tribunal advised him to keep the tools to study for the safety of future generations. Nerevar agreed, under the condition that the tools and heart would never be used in the way that the Dwemer intended. Upon returning to the Red Mountain, however, they found Dagoth unwilling to give up the tools, saying that only he could be trusted with them. Through the use of force, they regained the tools, and Dagoth fled. Over the years, one of the tribunal secretly studied the tools and learned of their potential power, telling the other two of his vision of a new world of peace and prosperity, with the tribunal at its head as immortals. The three agreed to see this vision created, and went to the Red Mountain once again, using the tools to transform themselves into living gods. Depending on the account, Nerevar either died from his wounds after fighting with Dagoth-Ur to reclaim the tools, or he was killed afterwards by the tribunal so that they could use the tools. Regardless, the Daedric prince Azura decided to punish the tribunal for their crimes against the gods, and turn the skin of the Chimer from the original golden color to much darker colors. She also turned their eyes red, and caused the eruption of the Red Mountain to cover Morrowind with ash. Henceforth, the Chimer would be known as Dunmer, meaning Dark Elves. Azura also prophesied that she would eventually reincarnate Nerevar in order to enact proper revenge against the tribunal. In the meantime, Dagoth-Ur managed to retain some form of connection to the heart of Lorkhan, keeping him alive and allowing him to slowly gather power. Centuries later, in the Second Era, the Empire of Tiber Septim began conquering Tamriel, and set their eyes on Morrowind. Many of the generals of the Imperial legions feared invading Morrowind due to the strength and fanaticism of the Dark Elves. To avoid bloodshed, a treaty was signed between Septim and one of the tribunal, allowing Morrowind to become a part of the Empire, but retaining their rights of faith and self-government. This caused a large amount of unrest amongst the Dark Elves, but it avoided a costly war. Also during this time, the tribunal wished to return to the Red Mountain to renew their powers, but they were thwarted by Dagoth-Ur. This led to them continually growing weaker, while Dagoth grew stronger. Dagoth's plan was to take over Tamriel by spreading the Ash Blight and Corporous diseases, in order to make Tamriel's denizens violent, insane, and susceptible to Dagoth's dream messages and control. Dagoth also sets out to finish the Dwemer's project of using the heart of Lorkhan to create a massive metal golem. This process continued into the Third Era as Morrowind continued to decline, and the Tribunal were unable to stop Dagoth-Ur. Finally, a prisoner is sent to Morrowind by the Emperor Uriel Septim VII, and it comes to light that they are indeed the reincarnation of Nerevar, sent to restore faith in the Daedra, stop Dagoth-Ur, and bring about the fall of the Tribunal. This individual, known as the Nerevarine, eventually accomplishes this by collecting the ancient Dwemer enchanted tools, entering the Red Mountain, and using the tools to sever the heart's connection to the mortal plane. This resulted in Dagoth-Ur and the Tribunal becoming mortal, allowing the Nerevarine to slay Dagoth, ending the Blight from taking over Morrowind. A new religious movement rose up in Morrowind that denounced the godhood of the Tribunal, and returned worship to the true Tribunal that the original Chimer worshipped. Unfortunately, shortly into the Fourth Era, a floating meteor that was kept at bay above Morrowind finally crashed into the land, causing extreme devastation in a time known as the Red Year. Many Dunmer died, and parts of Morrowind were left uninhabitable for many years, forcing the remaining Dunmer to move to either Skyrim or the island of Solstheim off the coast. When some Dunmer eventually tried to return to Morrowind, they were met by an invading force of Argonians from Black Marsh. The Dunmer people have been through a number of crises and tumultuous times, much like any other race on Tamriel, and a good amount of these were brought upon them by hubris. In addition, many Dunmer of Morrowind have a strong distaste for any foreigners in their land, retaining the rampant elitism that many of the original elves possessed. This, along with the large amounts of slavery common in Morrowind, has made the Dunmer a common target for distrust and hate, especially among the beast folk and Imperials. Regardless, as mentioned, the Dunmer in their homeland have been a fan favorite among Elder Scrolls fans for many years, particularly due to the release of Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, and the strange culture and locations that it presented. Time will tell if the Dark Elves will regain Morrowind and thrive once again, but history will not soon forget the Dunmer.